So hello and welcome everyone to this webinar in which we will talk about what's new with MedDRA version 27.0 and also what's new with the MSSO. We provide this webinar twice a year shortly before the release of the upcoming next MedDRA version to inform you on a high level about, first of all, changes in the MedDRA terminology itself since the last release, but also to update you with other activities related to MedDRA and the MSSO. This is the second webinar for version 27.0 that is provided in English, but the training material will be translated into several other languages as well in March. So if you are interested to take this webinar, for instance in Spanish, French, Russian, Korean or Chinese, please refer to the training page of the MedDRA website where you can find the schedule for these webinars. So I'm Caroline Wilson and work as a medical officer at the MSSO and will be your instructor today. And I'm joined by my colleague Leander, who was speaking to you before. We both will take you through this webinar that will take around 1 hour. Leander already mentioned, please submit any questions that you may have during the webinar through the question pane that you can find in the control panel of the GoToWebinar application, and you can find it on the right hand of your screen. And I will allow as much time as possible for questions both during the course and also at the end of the presentation. Now let's start with some more general information. Many of you will already be familiar with the content of this slide. The development of MedDRA was adopted by ICH in the mid-90s, and ICH has finally become the owner of the terminology. The MSSO was then put in place by ICH to maintain, further develop and distribute MedDRA on contract. And all these MSSO activities are overseen by the ICH MedDRA Management Committee with members from industry and regulators from the ICH regions and a member from the WHO as observer. Please be aware of the following disclaimers and copyright notices. ICH is not only the owner of MedDRA, but also owns the training material that we will be using in this webinar. It is protected worldwide. You may use the slides with the exception of the ICH and MSSO logos, but will have to clearly indicate that ICH owns the copyright. Also, any adaptations of the slides have to be clearly labeled. The second bullet point refers to warranty and liability issues you should be aware of. And the third bullet point is not relevant for today because we will not be using any third-party slides. And these are the topics that we will cover today. We will first look into a summary of the changes made in the terminology, including the standardized MedDRA queries or SMQs. We will then talk about proactive maintenance requests and translation activities. After that, we will look at changes made in the points to consider documents and talk about our mapping activities and updates of MedDRA IT tools. And towards the end, we will talk about MedDRA training, and I will share some information about upcoming meetings related to MedDRA. So what's new with MedDRA version 27.0? The English version of MedDRA version 27.0 will be available on March 1st, 2024. In other words, tomorrow. This version is a complex release, meaning that changes may affect all 5 levels of MedDRA, not only the LLT and PT level. This version is a complex release, and for this release, we considered 1,582 change requests, including requests related to SMQs. 1,206 of these change requests were approved, and 310 were not approved. They were rejected. 66 change requests are still suspended either because more clarification was needed from the requester or because the international medical officers of the MSSO needed more time for their discussion to come to a final conclusion. So these changes reflect the differences between MedDRA version 26.1, which we are currently using, and version 27.0, which will be released tomorrow. This is now a nice graphical display of the net changes of terms in each of the 27 system organ classes or SOCs in MedDRA. And you can see that the highest number of net changes took place in SOC investigations, followed by injury, poisoning and procedural complications SOC, and the SOC surgical and medical procedures. Let us first look at the complex changes, in other words, the changes above the PT level. There were no changes at the SOC and high-level group term, or HLGT level. But there was a change at the high-level term level, the HLT level. Previous HLT, application and installation site reactions, was split into two HLTs. One is called application site reactions, and the other is the HLT installation site reactions, meaning that a new HLT installation site reactions was created, and one HLT was renamed from application and installation site reactions to application site reactions. And both are multi-axial, having the primary SOC, general disorders at administration site reactions, and a secondary link to SOC, injury, poisoning, and procedural complications. The reason for splitting this HLT was to better support data analysis, to help to better distinguish topical medicinal products that are applied like creams, ointments, or patches versus products that are instilled, such as drops. Those of you who are using MedDRA for quite some time already may remember that the renamed HLT application site reactions was actually the original name of this HLT between MedDRA versions 2.1 and 3.3, so quite some time ago. All these complex changes are summarized in the What's New version 27.0 document that you will find on the MedDRA website by tomorrow under the headers How to Use and Support Documentation. And the same information is also available on the change request page on the MedDRA website. This is the slide that I've shown before, indicating that most of the changes have been made in SOC investigations, as it is usually the case with each MedDRA version update. So now let us look into some more details of these term changes. This slide now provides more details on additions to SOC investigations in this new MedDRA version. It is the largest system organ class based on the number of terms, and again, the greatest number of the net changes in version 27.0 was in this SOC. The graph now displays the HLGTs from SOC investigations which had new LLTs added to them. A total of 135 LLTs. And you can see that quite a number of HLGTs are affected, representing quite a spread across therapeutic areas: cardiac and vascular, endocrine, gastrointestinal, hematology, immunology, metabolic, nutritional, blood, musculoskeletal, neurology, renal, respiratory. So depending on your product portfolio and your area of interest, check out for these new terms. The next slide goes into more detail about new investigation LLTs that reflect imaging procedures or techniques. And there are 29 new LLTs which were added in version 27.0, which are related to imaging procedures. This graphical display shows the particular HLTs that those LLTs were added to, like for instance, cardiac imaging procedures, central nervous system imaging procedures, gastrointestinal and abdominal imaging procedures, respiratory tract, thoracic, etc. Again, depending on your therapeutic area, you may want to look into these HLTs to get familiar with these new LLTs, which may be useful for your day-to-day work. We also added 53 new immune-related LLTs in this release of MedDRA. They are distributed across a number of HLTs, and not all of them have a primary link to SOC immune system disorders. The left side of the slide, so the dark red bars, displays LLT counts of terms and their primary HLT link. You can see that some of these LLTs have a primary link to SOC immune system disorders, like for instance the HLT allergic reactions NEC or the HLT immune and associated conditions NEC or nervous system autoimmune disorders. But quite a number have primary links to SOC surgical and medical procedures or SOC investigations, like HLT autoimmunity analysis or HLT immune response protein analysis NEC or immunology analysis NEC. So these reside in SOC investigations. And the HLT immunizations is grouped under SOC surgical and medical procedures. So please be aware that these two SOCs are single axial. Terms in these SOCs do not have secondary linkages to other system organ classes. You will only find these 7 LLTs that are grouped under these HLTs, autoimmunity analysis, immune response protein analysis, NEC, immunizations, and immunology analysis, NEC, in SOC surgical and medical procedures or SOC investigations, not in any other system organ classes. Now, the right side of this graph, the blue bars, displays LLT counts for terms which only have a secondary link to SOC immune system disorders, because they are primarily grouped under the SOC representing the site of manifestation. These HLTs that you see here all reside in SOC immune system disorders, and the new LLTs have a secondary link to these HLTs. But the primary link is to the SOC representing the prime manifestation site. Just to give you an example, the new LLT exercise-induced vasculitis, which is grouped under the PT cutaneous vasculitis, is primarily linked to SOC skin and subcutaneous tissue disorders based on its prime manifestation site, the skin. But it has a secondary link to the HLT vasculitis, oh, it's a tongue breaker, vasculitis in SOC immune system disorders, representing the etiology of the condition. And another secondary link to SOC vascular disorders because the LLT exercise-induced vasculitis represents a specific type of vasculitis. But the prime manifestation site is, of course, the skin. Again, if you work in the immunology area, it might be important for you to familiarize yourself with these new LLTs. And you could see that it wouldn't be enough to just search the hierarchy in SOC immune system disorders. You would also need to search the single axial, the non-multi-axial SOCs, like the SOC surgical and medical procedures and SOC investigations, to find new terms of interest. Moving forward, we see some other additions, here in the area of medication errors and in the HLT medication errors product use errors, and issues NEC. NEC stands for Not Elsewhere Classified. This HLT groups the PT, circumstance or information capable of leading to medication error. And several LLTs were added under this PT, and this slide displays 4 of these LLT additions. They will provide greater granularity when coding these potential medication errors. So, first of all, the LLT, potential for medication error, then potential for medication error wrong dose, an additional LLT named potential for medication error wrong drug, and last but not least, LLT potential for medication error wrong route. So these new LLTs will allow you to be more specific when trying to capture the details of the circumstances that could lead to medication errors. Still talking about new LLTs for coding medication errors, now related to the HLT product monitoring errors and issues. This slide now shows LLT additions under the PT drug monitoring procedure not performed, which again will provide greater granularity for coding purposes. These new terms will help to capture the most clinically important organ systems that can be affected by monitoring errors. And here they are: LLT labeled hepatic function monitoring not performed, LLT labeled renal function monitoring not performed, and labeled blood monitoring test not performed. So we always try to keep up with science because the success of MedDRA, of course, depends on its long-term maintenance and its evolution based on its ability to incorporate new scientific advances and also changes in the regulatory environment. Some of the terms which were requested as additions to version 27.0 show the importance of following medical evolution. So one example is the new PT gene therapy. Several more specific terms in this relatively new and growing field of MedDRA were already requested in previous versions. Another example is the PT metagenomic analysis. Metagenomic analysis is a field in molecular biology that involves the collective analysis of genetic material that is extracted directly from microbial communities within a host organism, so a very specialized field of research. The primary goal of metagenomic analysis is to understand the diversity and the composition and functional potential of microbial communities within a particular environment, as for example in the gut microbiome, which is in the focus of many studies. Several terms related to chikungunya immunization and testing have been requested following the approval of a new chikungunya vaccine. Chikungunya is a viral disease transmitted to humans by mosquito bites. So you see, we try to keep the terminology up to date in terms of advances in medicine, science, and regulatory activities, and we try to make sure to add appropriate terms to our medical terminology to allow you to code more specifically. Another example for new term additions now related to special populations. We added the PT woman of non-childbearing potential to SOC social circumstances. This is actually a classification. It is not a term for coding adverse events or anamnestic data of a specific patient. It is a concept that is frequently used in the in- or exclusion criteria of clinical studies, and it defines a population of women who are not able to conceive for different reasons. Like, for instance, they may have reached menopause, or they may have undergone surgical interventions that led to sterility, or they may suffer a medical condition that makes it impossible for them to get pregnant. So be aware that this concept is different from the infertility terms that you can find in SOC reproductive system and breast disorders. It represents a population. Usually, the terms in SOC social circumstances are not medical concepts, but they often fall within the medical scope, so to say, because they may be relevant for the evaluation of data, such, for instance, as assessing the treatment outcome based on the presence of well-known risk factors, which may be included, and these may be included in the social circumstances SOC, like this one here, woman of non-childbearing potential. Another new PT I would like to address for the special populations is the PT maternal immunization. Maternal immunization is the immunization of a pregnant woman with the intent to stimulate the production of antibodies which cross the placenta and provide some protection to the neonate in the first few weeks or months of life. It is important to understand that this PT represents a procedure, an immunization, and that is why it is grouped in SOC surgical and medical procedures, which is a single axial SOC, as you heard before, meaning that it has no secondary linkages, also not to the HLT exposures associated with pregnancy, delivery, and lactation. And that is important to remember because you might think that similar concepts are going to be linked to this HLT, exposures associated with pregnancy, delivery, and lactation. And therefore, Section 3.30 of the MedDRA Term Selection Points to Consider document addressing exposures during pregnancy and breastfeeding was also updated to provide more detailed guidance for such scenarios. The next slide now takes us to the summary of changes to the SMQs in version 27.0. No new SMQs were added in this version, so we still have 110 SMQ topics, 110 level 1 SMQs. However, because some of the SMQs are hierarchical, meaning that they contain subordinate level 2, level 3, or even level 5 SMQs, the total number of individual SMQs is 230. We continue to maintain these SMQs based on new additions or changes to MedDRA, and as a result, there were 248 PT changes, including additions but also modifications to already included terms in version 27.0. If you think that there is a new SMQ topic that we should consider for development, you can use the WebCR tool, the web-based change request tool, to submit such a request for a new SMQ topic. You will be asked for additional information, a number of criteria to justify your request for this new SMQ. The development of an SMQ can be complex and is really quite time and resource consuming. And therefore, a sound and detailed justification of your request is truly needed. And also use the latest version 27.0 of the SMQ introductory guide as the most useful and comprehensive reference on all aspects that relate to the SMQs. So this was just a high-level overview of the term changes in version 27.0. If you really want to see all the details of the changes made in the new MedDRA version, please refer to the version report, which is provided with the release files of each new MedDRA version. It's an Excel spreadsheet with multiple pages that will allow you to look into all of these topics. What new LLTs have been added, what new PTs have been added, what LLTs have been promoted, what PTs have been demoted, etc., etc. So in this spreadsheet, you'll really be able to find all details of the terminology changes with the new release of MedDRA. Also, the changes in the SMQs, PT changes and LLT changes. And here you see the numbers for version 27.0. So let me stop here and ask for questions. Did we receive any questions so far, Leander?
No, we have no questions. We had somebody who's got audio problems, so I can hear you clearly, Carol-Ann, so it might just be the individual, but no questions at this time.
Thank you, Leander. So then let's continue and let's move to another topic, that is proactive MedDRA maintenance. Proactive maintenance is the process by which you as a user can make the MSSO aware of inconsistencies or possible corrections that are needed in MedDRA. And here are some examples of proactivity requests from the past. For instance, a user saw problems with the placement of abrasion terms, or we were asked to review the placement of dental restoration terms. And another user requested to add chemical burn grade terms to MedDRA. And these proactivity requests here were actually all implemented. So if you would like to submit such a proactivity request, you should do so via the help desk. Here, the email address, the link to the help desk, not through the WebCR tool. And please include a more detailed justification for your proactive maintenance request, as this will be helpful for the evaluation of your request and thereby also increase the chance that it will be approved and finally implemented. We had one proactivity request that was implemented in this version, 27.0. A user asked us to review the PT placement under HLT, oncologic complications and emergencies, to ensure consistency of these placements based on the MedDRA rules for using the site of prime manifestation to determine the primary SOC allocation for terms. So based on this proactivity request, the primary SOC allocation of these 5 PTs was changed in version 27.0. Intracranial tumor hemorrhage, malignant pleural effusion, metastatic pulmonary embolism, pericardial effusion malignant, and pulmonary tumor thrombotic microangiopathy. You can see that these 5 PTs previously had SOC neoplasms as primary SOC, but the primary SOC was changed to the site of prime manifestation. You see it here. Our next topic is the MedDRA translations. And this slide provides you with an update on an ongoing, demanding project that we have to translate MedDRA into additional languages. And all these newer translations intend to support the Electronic Prescribing Information Initiative of the European Union. 21 languages are currently available already in the MedDRA browser. In the last year, the Arabic translation was released in January, the Estonian translation in September, and the Finnish in December last year. Several other languages are currently under development, the translation of these languages. Croatian, Icelandic, Lithuanian, Maltese, Norwegian, and Slovenian. So these are under development. And the translation of these other 4 languages will start during this year: Bulgarian, Danish, Romanian, Slovak. We do not provide release dates for these pending 10 new translations so far, because the timeline for the release of these individual translations is the time really that it takes to get a good quality translation. But every time when a new translation becomes available, we will inform you via email and announcements on the MedDRA website. So if you are interested in any of these 10 new translations. Watch out for these announcements. Let's now look into the updates of the points to consider documents. You will see that quite a few changes were made to the PTC document for MedDRA term selection. But again, due to time constraints, I will not be able to provide you with all details, but just with a general overview on these changes without going into much detail. So please refer to the document yourself to get more familiar with the details of the changes that were implemented. In the red-lined version of the PTC document for MedDRA terms and selection will allow you to identify the implemented changes much more easily. So you don't have to read the whole document again. The first change is easy and obvious, straightforward. The release number and date were updated on the title page of the document. And here you see a screenshot of the red-lined version of the document. So this is how the edits are highlighted in the document. That's why it's called red-lined. Now let me give you an overview on the changes made. In section 3.10, changes were made related to exposures during pregnancy and breastfeeding. In section 3.15, entitled Medication Errors, Accidental Exposures and Occupational Exposures, changes were made to the text itself and to the examples that are provided. In section 3.16 about misuse, abuse and addiction, edits were made to the table to compare misuse, abuse and addiction with the concepts of medication error and off-label use. In section 3.27, addressing off-label use, there are edits to the text recommending that you should always try to get clarification for information that is suggestive of off-label use, but is not reported as such. So in other words, where it is not clear that the use of a medicinal product was actually off-label, you should not infer off-label use when it was not explicitly reported, but always try to obtain clarifying information. This was the edit in this section. In section 3.28.3, addressing product quality issue versus medication errors, there are edits to the text in line with the change in section 3.15.1, medication errors, for consistency purposes. And finally, in section 4.1, addressing versioning, existing text was completely deleted and replaced by a reference to the best practices document, which provides current and comprehensive, very comprehensive recommendations related to versioning. It is obvious that quite a number of changes were made to the MedDRA term selection points to consider document, and again, please refer to the red-lined version to make yourself familiar with the details of these edits. In the MedDRA data retrieval and presentation points to consider document, only the title page was changed, so no further explanations are required in this regard here for this document. Now let's look at the companion document, a document that was created to provide additional, even more detailed information and more examples on particular selected MedDRA-related topics. And this is where you can find it on the MedDRA website under How to Use, Support Documentation, and the header Points to Consider Documents and MedDRA Best Practices. Here it is, MedDRA Points to Consider Companion Document. The ICH working group is currently working on updates to the already existing sections, namely data quality, medication errors, and product quality issues. So if these are complete, you will be notified and there will be postings on the MedDRA website. And the working group is also developing a new section. And this section deals with manufacturing and quality system issues. If this section is completed and finally approved by the MedDRA Management Committee, we will let you know that this additional section will be added to the companion document and when this new release of the document will become available. Any questions related to the last topics, Leander?
Hello, Carol-Ann. Yes, we had one actually on translation. So
Yeah.
we had an individual who was asking in particular, and I'm not sure if you know the answer or whether we'll need to go to our Chinese colleagues, but are the LLTs translated to a unique Chinese term? So in particular, the individual was asking that they've got an issue with Chinese authorities where the same Chinese word is used for several different LLT codes, for instance, eyelid oedema, and it's represented in 6 different LLT codes. So I'm not sure if you know about the Chinese translations or whether I'll need to take that offline with our colleagues.
Maybe we should take it offline. I know that there are duplications in the translations. You may know that in the English version of the terminology, we have British English and American English terms. So exactly the same meaning, like edema, for instance, one time spelled with an O and an E, sometimes only spelled with an E. And that's why, and this is of course not reflected in the translation in the other languages. There are no differences in edema, also not in German or in French whatsoever. So that's why there are duplications. But provide us with some examples and we can forward it to our Chinese colleagues so that you get a more detailed answer there.
Thank you. Thanks, Carol-Ann. No other questions at this time.
Thank you, Leander. So let's continue. And this is our next topic, an update on MedDRA mapping. So our activities related to mapping of MedDRA to other terminologies. We start with the SNOMED CT to MedDRA mapping. You may recall that this initial release of this mapping was in April 2021. And it is updated annually. And the next release is planned in April this year. It will be based on MedDRA version 26.1, which was released in September 2023, and the January 2024 release of the SNOMED CT International version. To date, most revisions of the mapping have been changes in MedDRA and SNOMED CT itself based on new content in the terminologies, or changes in currency status of MedDRA terms or inactivations of SNOMED CT terms. Let's move on with the IMDRF to MedDRA mapping. IMDRF stands for International Medical Device Regulators Forum. And this forum has developed harmonized terminologies for capturing and reporting adverse events related to medical devices. Annex E is of special interest because it addresses health effects related to medical devices. So it contains clinical signs, symptoms, and condition terms and codes. And this Annex E has been mapped to MedDRA in a cooperation between the IMDRF and ICH. There are approximately 800 of these mapping terms that exist currently. You'll find Annex E with the corresponding MedDRA terms and codes on the IMDRF website. And the next update of the mapping will take place in March this year, so quite soon. Moving on to ICD. The first ICD-10 to MedDRA mapping was launched in June 2023. It is a one-directional mapping of ICD to MedDRA, and the second release of the mapping was published on the 26th of January this year based on the WHO 2019 International Core version of ICD-10 and MedDRA version 26.1. The release package of this second release contains the ICD-10 to MedDRA release notes, the actual ICD-10 to MedDRA map, and the ICD-10 to MedDRA mapping conventions. And the MSSO will continue to maintain this mapping based on the latest release of MedDRA and input from users like you. We also continue a joint activity between the WHO and ICH, with the MSSO supporting the development of a bidirectional ICD-11 to MedDRA mapping. The pilot mapping of one ICD-11 chapter started in July 2023, and our work is ongoing. After finalization and release of the mapping, the WHO and ICH plan to maintain the mappings based on user feedback and changes in the underlying terminologies. If there are any news related to the ICD-11 mapping, you will be notified via email as well as on the MedDRA website. Any questions, Leander?
No, not at this time. Oh, yes, one, Carol-Ann, actually. The documents that you were talking about, I think the PTC companion document, they missed the date that they're being released. I wondered if you could mention it again.
Yeah, so the companion document is not newly released with each release of a MedDRA version in March. You know that the other PTC documents are newly released on each 1st of March with the major version release of MedDRA, with the complex release, but not the companion document. The companion document is maintained based on user feedback from regulators or from industry, scientific organizations, and they are updated based on this user feedback. So the current version of the companion document is version 2.0, and then depending on the amount of changes, a new version will be named 2.1 or even 3.0 with a new release. We don't know yet when this new release of the document will take place. So obviously it is planned to be released, the new release with the new updates of the existing chapters is planned for this year, but I cannot tell yet when the release of the additional version containing the new chapter for the manufacturing issues will be released. It really depends on the progress of the working group and the final approval of the MedDRA Management Committee.
Thank you, Carol-Ann. And we had one on mapping. We've had, why is the MedDRA version 26.1 being used for SNOMED CT and MedDRA mapping release instead of the latest version 27.0?
Yeah, because you know it's difficult to synchronize the releases of both terminologies. So we took the latest release of SNOMED from January, and of course in January we didn't have the 27.0 yet, so we had to take the 26.1 MedDRA release to maintain or to produce the mapping. So it's really a problem with synchronization of the versioning of the two terminologies. But it will be maintained based on new releases, so you will see that.
Thank you. It's always trying to sync them, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's helpful. And then we had somebody else who said, is there an easy way to check for an LLT or PT coded in an old version, for instance, 25.0, was affected by any change in the following version till the actual one?
Yes, there is. Let me continue with the presentation, and if we have time, I will show this afterwards. Yeah, at the end of the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Because otherwise we may get into time problems here. So now we come to the update on the MedDRA information technology tools. Most of you will know WebCR, a tool that allows you to submit change requests to the MSSO, and these can be requests for terms changes like the addition of new terms or changes to existing terms, but also SMQ changes as well as translation changes. You may have noticed that the user interface of WebCR was updated in November 2023, so after the last What's New webinar. And the following slides intend now to give you an overview of these changes. Let's briefly look into WebCR for those of you who are not as familiar with this tool. It is a web-based tool for submitting change requests which has this URL. Change request must be submitted in English, and the tool allows you to propose changes to MedDRA terms and SMQs and to submit translation update requests. The interface was improved to make it more intuitive and more user-friendly, and you will always get immediate visual and email confirmation after the submission of your change request. You have the ability to export requests you submitted for further review, as well as to query the change request history of all change requests considered so far back to version 5.1. This is now the new landing page that was modified to make it easier to use. You will need a MedDRA ID and a change request password to submit these requests. The tool guides users to enter all needed information, and a detailed user guide is available in the support section of the tool or on the change request information page on the MedDRA website. This slide now shows how the interface was modified based on an example for a change request for a new LLT. So you see these here, you have the option to add a new term, move a term or change a term link, other changes. We opted to add a new term, then you have a drop-down list, add a new LLT, and then you enter the proposed LLT name. Optionally, you can also add the PT this new LLT should be linked to, and you have to provide an appropriate justification and also documentation of your request. It is really important to help the MSSO understand the need of this change, new LLT in this instance, and to increase the likelihood of the change request being approved and implemented. And here you see the support tab. So here you can, in this section you will find a user guide to get more familiar with the tool. Let's now talk about MedDRA training. We provide free training to all MedDRA users in different formats. In-person classroom training, live webinar training like the one we have today, as well as self-paced e-learning training. You can register for in-person and live webinar trainings on the MedDRA website as you have done for this webinar, and this link takes you to this page. Our e-learning resources includes instructional videos that you can access via this link, and we also have recordings of previously provided webinars on our YouTube channel. Here the link. So depending on your language preference or preference for particular MSSO trainers, presentation style for instance, you can visit our YouTube channel and find recordings of previous webinars from all MSSO trainers. We have some news related to MedDRA training. First of all, we are happy and proud to announce that we have released an MSSO mission video which explains the MSSO's mission and vision. It is approximately 3 to 4 minutes long, and you can find it on the YouTube channel, and also there is a link to it on the MedDRA website. I would also like to make you aware that we will start offering training in Brazilian Portuguese. Live training in Brazil in local language is planned for March 25th and 26th. Detailed information is available on the training page on the MedDRA website, and webinars in Brazilian Portuguese are planned in the future as well. Last but not least, I would like to inform you about upcoming MedDRA user group meetings. The first one is the European user group meeting, a face-to-face meeting with no virtual component that will take place on April 10th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. local time. The meeting will be conducted in English and the location will be Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Here, the hotel and address where this meeting will take place. In-person registration for the meeting is already available on the user group tab on the MedDRA website, where you will find the agenda as well. There are still a few seats available, so if you are interested in the topics that will be presented and discussed and in networking with other MedDRA users, please consider to join us in Amsterdam. There will also be a Chinese face-to-face user group meeting on May 13th from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. local time, which again will not have a virtual component. It will be conducted in Chinese, and here is the location in Beijing. And the agenda and registration details will be posted to the user group page on the MedDRA website when they are available. And we will also have a user group meeting in the US, again a face-to-face meeting with no virtual component. The date will be 13th of June this year from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. local time. Meeting language will be English, and the meeting will be held in Bridgewater, New Jersey. Here, the hotel information. And the agenda and registration details will again be posted to the user group page on the MedDRA website when available. So here we are. Last chance for questions. Are there further questions, Leander?
No, there's no further questions. So if you're happy to do that demonstration, I think that would be helpful to show where you can access changes.
Yes, I will try so. Let me go to the MedDRA website. So this is the landing page. Here is the link to the MedDRA MSO mission. And here is the shortcut to the web-based browser. I don't want Chinese, I want English. Log in. So let me look for, I don't know, peripheral edema. And search. And here I have the peripheral edema. If I make a right mouse click on this term, I can open the history of this term. Here we are. And then after some time, depending on how many changes were made, you can see the complete history of this term. You see it was added to the terminology in version 2.1, so very early, and the PT was edema peripheral. And you see that additional links, so secondary linkages, were added in version 2.3, and then the primary SOC changed because first it was the primary SOC cardiac disorders, now in version 3.2 it is general disorders, etc., etc. And since version 4.0 there are no further changes to this term. So this is how you can search the term history. Just do a right mouse click and then this window will open and you can see the history of the term. We have a few minutes left, so let me go back to the home page, to the MedDRA website, and show you where to find the user group information. It is under the header News and Events. Here are the user groups. And if you open this page, you see here the European user group meeting, Chinese, and the US user group meeting, and also the past user group meetings with the material, the presentations, the slides that were presented at that meetings. Now training, here you have the schedule of our trainings. So here's the class, face-to-face classes. I talked about the Brazilian face-to-face classes in Brazilian Portuguese. There are face-to-face classes in Mexico, in Spanish, and here's the European MedDRA user group meeting. Also, there will be one face-to-face training in Spain, in Barcelona, on the 7th and 8th of May. Currently, we have face-to-face training in Istanbul, and here new face-to-face trainings in the United States in April. And here's the user group meeting as well. And if you want to check the webinars, here they are. And you see I talked about, this is the one that we have today. And here you see the what's new with MedDRA 27.0 and the MSSO webinars in the other languages, Russian, Korean, Spanish, Chinese, and French. So if you want to register for these, you can do so via this website. What else do we have in training? Here we have the course descriptions if you're interested, more detailed information about the training courses that we provide. We have links to the training materials. We have introductions of the MSSO, all MSSO trainers. And here is the link to the instructional videos. Here they are. And we also have an interactive MedDRA coding training. How to use, very important, support documentation. I had shown you a screenshot. Here you have the support documentation, and if you click on the points to consider documents in MedDRA best practices, here you have the MedDRA term selection points to consider document, the MedDRA data retrieval and presentation points to consider document, and also the redlined version of these documents, but still for version 26.1. Starting tomorrow, you will see version 27.0. And here's the companion document and also the MedDRA best practices document that provides comprehensive guidance for handling versioning of MedDRA. So these are the, and for if you click on the actual version, you will then see the introductory guides to MedDRA, the introductory guide for the standardized MedDRA query, the what's new documents, summary of what has been changed in the respective MedDRA version, and for the IT people implementing these versions in the systems, the distribution file format document. Change request, here's the link to provide you with change request information, and here you have the link to the WebCR tool, the quick guide to the tool, and here the summary of the complex changes to be expected in version 27.0 and the proactivity proposals. Yeah, and here see we also have a mapping page, so if you're interested in the mappings, here you have more information and more links for the specific mappings that we provide. Any further questions?
Yes, we do, Carol Ann. On the demonstration, so that was helpful. Thank you about the coding. But the person is asking about the opposite. So for the LLT coded in 25.0, can you now see if there's changes affecting it in versions 25.1, 26.0, and 26.1? Can you see the opposite?
No, then you would have to look. Where I would need. Let me come back to you. You would need to know which PT has changed. I would suppose that if you look, you would always use the latest MedDRA version that you have for coding purposes. So then you would look into the term history and you would see the full history. I'm not sure. Let's look into version. Let's make a test here and look into the version 2.2, peripheral edema. Here we have it. open history and see if we see the same history. So if it's also forward history. Yes, it is. You see? So I've selected MedDRA version, as you can see here, 2.2, and we see the full history of the term up to version 4.0. And after version 4.0, no further changes happen to this specific LLT. So if further changes would have been implemented, you would see the full history, even though you have selected a very early version of MedDRA. So, new question.
Thank you, Karen.
You didn't test this.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always good to have a head-scratching moment there. Yeah. But thanks very much for the question. And if you need some more assistance, just either write into us at the help desk or let us know. So we've had one that's in relation to coding conventions, and I'm not sure we can take this one online, and I am conscious of time, but if I read it and then you let me know whether it's something we can deal with now or later. But I would like to know basic information regarding coding convention, where we try to code by mapping the reported term to the most relevant LLT and the SOC. What about the significance of the PT? So they've given an example of chronic fronto-maxillar sinusitis and LLT, chronic polysinusitis or maxillary, I'm probably not saying that right, apologies, sinusitis. Which one is appropriate? PT is the same. So I'm not sure if that's something you can answer here.
So you would always, when coding, you would always try to really select the term that best reflects the reported condition. You would always use the same word order. You would try to capture the full information that you got. And on the analysis part, so this is the coding part, you would always try to be as specific as possible. That's really important to remember. On the analysis, and you would rather refer to the PET level. Why do we have this granularity in MedDRA? Well, because sometimes companies or regulators are using autoencoding tools, so you can easily have hits to the reported terms. And also it's a good guidance for coders, because if you would always only have the LLT that is identical to the PT, it would be difficult sometimes for the coders to understand medical terminology, for instance, when it comes to psychiatry or so. It's always good to have some colloquial terms in there, some other wording of the condition to guide coders. But on the coding end, you would, in the coding conventions, you would always ask the coders to code as specifically as they can to select the LLT that best reflects the reported condition, the reported verbatim. Hope this answers your question. If not, just ask us via help desk and you will get a more detailed answer then.
Thanks very much. And we had some comments in, so thanks for the demonstration, thanks for the helpful webinar. So I am conscious of time and we have run over, so there's nothing at the moment that I think is important to ask at this moment in time, but thank you all for all your questions and for the webinar. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, and thank you from my end as well for your time and participation, and also a big thank you to you, Leander, for supporting me today. And I hope you found this presentation interesting and useful, and also hope to meet you again in either a user group meeting, a face-to-face training, or other webinars that we offer. So take care and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.